Hi, welcome to this week's edition of Blue Talk. Again, John, Dave, and myself. We're going to look back over Ireland's victory against Wales last weekend, Leinster's victory against Edinburgh, all the other Pro 14 action. Of course, look forward to our big game against England and Twickenham on Saturday, and our game against who we playing at the weekend, lads, Cardiff Blues on Sunday. So we'll kick off with Leinster first. Obviously, a great win, 50 points to 10, a rake of tries. Is it getting a bit easy for Leinster? Or?
Yeah, I saw a quote from Leo Cullen there saying, it's great, we got a bonus point win, blah, 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 but there was a lot of stuff we did wrong. And if it had been a different day, even against the same team, it might have had a different outcome. If we'd have been, maybe if we hadn't been as far ahead in the second half, there's a couple of things that we did that, he wasn't happy with. And also, then you've got the factor of, it's happened to us time and time again where we've run away with games against the Dragons, against, a team that's head goes down after we bang in a few tries. Then we come up against a team like Saracens that heads don't go down no matter what we do. And as I think Leo himself put it, you don't want to get into bad habits that are going to come back and bite you when the chips are down somewhere else even maybe against the same team. Even maybe you get Edinburgh in a knockout game and they just happen to be playing like kings, and you're taking them a bit easy because you're going, it's Edinburgh, whatever, we can do this. Yeah, we're a few points behind, but next thing you know, you're on your ass. So yeah, I know we're going to end up in the league is shit rant at some stage this evening, but I just, you got to cherish the wins as well when you
the league when you get them. The Pro 14 is the same as the SPL when Rangers got relegated. It's about as competitive as that. The wins are great, but is there any real value to them? Is there any value to them, John, when there's no effort required to achieve them? It's the achievement that's of value. The win, when you're in a competitive league, if you play well, whether you win or lose, at least there's some sense of, achievement in it. There's no sense of achievement in what we've seen over the last 5 weeks. None. And there's no benefit. There's no benefit to Leinster, and there's no benefit to Ireland, because players are going to come out of this and they'll have 10, 15 wins on the bounce under the belt, maybe 12, 15 bonus points. And then they'll come up against Saracens, or, well, maybe not Saracens, but Exeter or Toulouse or even Northampton Saints or England, and you get your ass handed to you on your plate and you're going, what the fuck just happened? We're just after winning 15 games on the bounce. Where did that come from? Do you see any real challenge in that league apart from the game against Munster?
I think there's several teams that on their day can do us damage.
Like Glasgow, like Edinburgh?
Perhaps on their day, perhaps. Ulster, Munster, the Irish teams obviously are doing the best out of this situation. So, we've, like, Ulster did give us a run there when Dan Levy wrecked himself. They should have won that game. That's only 2 years ago.
Yeah, it is 2 years ago in a different competition, John.
Less than 2 years. I know it's a different competition, but it's the same team, So my point is...
Sorry, go on, sorry. All right.
Well, not much really, but my point is that there are a few teams that could probably do us on the right day in, say, something like a Heineken Cup quarterfinal, or where they're playing, especially if they're playing.
What about in the Pro 12? What about in the Pro 12?
Well, in a Pro 12 knockout game, it's possible.
And the thing is, we're not. If you come into the European campaign cold after basically 12 training sessions on the bounce, or 7 training sessions on the bounce, and you come up against maybe somebody who's been match hardened through playing, even if the standard isn't as high, the competitiveness is as high, and you're not ready for it, you have to be match hardened, and I don't think we are. I'm really, really worried about that.
Well, I'm not saying you're wrong, Dave. I agree with you to a large extent. I'm trying to see the positives.
All right.
But I thought Cockrell's interview at the end of the match was quite telling. we'd always suspected it, that teams come to Dublin and have resigned themselves, that there's other battles to win and other points, easier points to pick up than selecting their or putting their best effort into winning points in Dublin, because it's very difficult. It's easier to win an away match in Italy or, you know, in another part of Ireland, let's say. And Cockrell kind of admitted that. And he also said that when you cut out the Edinburgh international players, they just don't have the squad to compete with us. And like, you can't doubt him when you look at the team that was selected. Like, even the try scorers, you know, Dave Carney played at the World Cup a couple of years ago. Luke McGrath was on the bench for Ireland. Dan Levy was a starter for Ireland when they won the Grand Slam. Then you had like Devon Toner and
World Cup finalist
Scott Fardy in the second row, and you know, like, that's a ferocious depth of talent that we have. And you know, like, if Leinster's team that they put out against Edinburgh last weekend played Edinburgh's firsts, it would be a very competitive match. I don't know who would win, but it would be a very competitive match. But if you take out whatever 11 or 12 of Edinburgh's first players, those lads that come in, they're nowhere near as good as the backups in Leinster.
Sure.
And you know, and like, I think that goes across the entire league, that we can play our seconds or even possibly thirds, and they're so much stronger than many of the other squads.
But like, what's the answer, Jason? Do we spread our good players around the rest of Ireland? Do we tie our hand behind our back? Do we, do we do?
No. But like, look, I think it's kind of a catch-22, John, because like, the matches are shown, right? The matches are all shown live on Air Sports, which is great for us as fans. We can watch gallons of rugby at the weekend. Now, the three of us love it. But like, it hits quite a small audience. There's no chit-chat about it on Monday. You know, there's no interest in the media. Well, whatever about the water, like, I'm talking about, like, if you listen to or watch any of the sports shows, there's no talk about it. Like, it's absolute, you know, like, for instance, on Monday, it was all GA talk on off the ball. Like, there was nothing about the Pro 12, because it's really not that interesting if Leinster are just a procession to go or walk away with it. You know, like I mean, the only way for it to happen is that more money needs to be put, like, I don't know where money's going to come from, but more money needs to be pumped into it so that other clubs can build up a squad. Like, do you remember a few years ago, the Ospreys had a squad that was, you know, almost like Real Madrid. It had All Blacks and Saffers and half the Welsh team. Like, you know,
It never got past the quarter-final in Europe.
No, it didn't. For whatever reason, it never did. Like, unfortunately, the one year that they were actually pretty good, they came up against Munster in a quarter-final in 2009, who were brilliant that day. You know, I think they were beaten in Biarritz another quarter-final, but like, they were unfortunate that they got kind of shitty draws. You know, Munster away, Biarritz away when Biarritz were good. Yeah, I agree. But that's the quality that you need to be playing against. You know, like, you need 2 or 3 of those clubs. I thought Glasgow were going to kick on, but like, I mean, Glasgow won 1 out of 5 games this season. You know what I mean? Like, they're.
It's funny you mentioned Glasgow and Ospreys, because somebody doing some research over the week discovered that both of them have done 6 bonus point wins in a row in the last 4 years. Glasgow, I think, have done it 3 times. And they remember, you know, for early in the season, they do it. They go on a big mad run of bonus point wins, and then all of a sudden they fall apart near Christmas, or they go into the Heineken Cup and Saracens to beat them or whatever. But apparently Ospreys have done it as well, and we have the chance to equal that now against Cardiff, which, you know, you'd have to fancy us to do that.
Cardiff are down 7 back row players.
Wow. Ouch. That's going to be a breakdown that we're going to win by the looks of it, especially if we've got the likes of Dan Levy kicking around.
The thing that worries me is even amongst people who are, you know, big rugby fans who would care about what's going on in the Pro 14, there's a certain amount of complacency in that the attitude is, well, it's not Leinster's fault. It's not Leinster's problem that this is happening. Now, it's not Leinster's fault. I mean, and there's nothing Leinster can do about it, but it is Leinster's problem. Because we're the team whose ass it's going to bite, you know, when you come up in a game and you just aren't ready for it. So, I mean, there's not, unless the South Africans come in, the Pro 14, it's the SPL, it's the Dutch Premier League, whatever, the Eredivisie. I mean, that's what we're in, and they're not powerhouses. They're not the ones that win European titles.
Yeah, well, that's the big thing. The South Africans coming riding over the horizon, riding to the rescue on their white horses. It's gonna be interesting if it happens after Christmas, if things actually do materialize the way they're supposed to. It'd be cracking to have 4 Super Rugby teams coming over and kicking the shite out of us. That'd smarten us up now, I have to say. So I suppose if we are looking to the future, we can look to that. What will it do? What will it do to the Dragons, though, or Cardiff, or, you know, the Italian teams?
Well, one would hope that the extra money they bring as a result of the massive television audience and sponsorship money in South African rugby is that it would, you know, upfund those teams, and they'd be able to sign more and better players, bring players home from. I mean, there's always been a problem in Wales with players going across the bridge, as it were. Gatland's law came in to try and stop that, but the problem, I mean, we had a situation there a couple of years ago where Wales were finding it very hard to field an under-20 squad in the Six Nations. I think it was 3 or 4 years ago. We're finding it difficult to field an under-20 squad for a game against France, because France's under-20s were their next national team, and Wales's under-20s were their next national team, and players didn't want to play in that match for Wales because it would mean that they couldn't play for anyone else. It would be the disqualifying level. So that's an issue that Wales have had, you know, in terms of getting players just because, and the reason they were doing that is not because they feel any less patriotic towards Wales or anything like that, but it's, you know, it would harm their earning potential.
CV.
Yeah, it would harm their earning potential. So you have that situation in Wales. There's always that tricky relationship between Wales and England. I don't know what the situation in Scotland, but in Ireland, I mean, in Ireland, it's ticking along nicely, Maria, but, you know, it could trip up very suddenly. If Wales or Scotland go down, we're going down with it.
Yeah, well, if you don't get the Saffers in quick enough, we certainly are. But your rugby could go down, so you wouldn't know with this way this pandemic's going. Teams falling like flies. The Dragons have had several weeks off. Italian sides have had the virus is going mental in Italy at the moment. Fiji now, in fact, the Fiji rugby team have almost as many cases of COVID at the moment than their whole nation has had in the whole history of the pandemic.
Has admitted.
36 cases of COVID in Fiji out of a population of 900,000 and 1 death. And I think there's 29 cases of COVID in the Fiji squad right now.
It's funny how when they leave Fiji and they're subjected to rigorous testing, suddenly they find that they have more than they thought they had.
Yeah, well, it's also they're isolated in the Pacific, an island in the middle of the Pacific.
It's an isolated island under an autocratic government, so
it's just quite a few islands, in fact. Many islands
still under an autocratic government. But anyway, back to the Pro 14, and back to the Leinster match, I suppose.
Let's look at
take the game in isolation. I mean, Leinster, like, some of the rugby we played was absolutely, you know, it was jaw-droppingly good. It has to be said.
Yeah, like listen to the commentators, you know, that they're in awe of watching Leinster, just with some of the movement and the offloading and the beautiful passing. Like I thought Frawley did a lovely break, and then he kind of passed out when he was on the ground. I think we scored a try. I can't.
We did. Luke McGrath was
Luke McGrath's try.
Yeah, like that was just a piece of beauty, and you can play the All Blacks or Argentina, or you can play, cool mine under sevens, but you still have to be able
to execute,
to make those passes and to play off the ground and, do those. And Luke McGrath has to be in the right position to be in support, following up. So all those things have to still happen regardless of your opposition. But clearly you can make those breaks if the quality of your opposition isn't putting the tackles in. And for periods of that game, it looked like Edinburgh weren't interested. And as I said earlier, when you hear the comments of Cockrell, I kind of thought to myself, I would be really annoyed if John and myself went to a very small school with low playing numbers, and we were never ever given a team talk that, well, you're playing Blackrock or you're playing Clongowes, lads, just go out there and give it your best. But if you lose, you lose. Don't we were, we probably were going to lose because there was much better players on, but we bloody fought until the last minute.
Allegedly, anyway. We were certainly told to fight until the last minute.
Yeah, wow.
It's the other thing about my other main issue with the Pro 14 is we don't know how good. I mean, you look at Frawley and you look at Jimmy O'Brien, who've been absolutely brilliant for us.
Jimmy O'Brien's a real find.
Yeah. But we don't know, John. That's the thing. We don't know.
Tommy O'Brien was an amazing find. Yeah. And then you've Jimmy O'Brien coming up. What is it with O'Brien's lately?
I'd love to see Jimmy O'Brien against serious opposition, because, my sense is that he's actually he's going to be a top player.
Yeah.
When you consider he's kind of playing out of position as well.
Yeah. And he looks like a good fullback.
Yeah.
If you didn't have Hugo Keenan returning,
he reads the game very well.
I think he played his schools rugby in the centre, if I'm not mistaken. Sorry, Jay. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, but you've got, a guy like Keane Kelleher came back into the Leinster fold from Connacht a few years ago. He kind of was very quiet, scattered number of appearances over the last season and a bit. And he comes on and he grabs his opportunity, scores three tries, Dave Kearney on the score sheet again. These lads are really, really making it difficult for Leo Cullen when all of the main boys that are away with Ireland come back. And, and as you say, Dave, those matches against Munster and in the Heineken Cup roll around. It's going to be a very difficult conversation that Lancaster's going to have to say to Dave Kearney, you're not in the starting 15 because James Lowe's back, or
whoever. Yeah, no, you're right.
Hugo Keenan is back.
I mean, leaving aside our questions about the Pro 14, it's in an enviable position that it's in both enviable and unenviable position that Cullen is in terms of, I'd say any other coach would kill to have half the talent he has, and he's probably going, oh God, I have to drop half of these lads. I mean, you look at guys who are playing really well. Obviously, Dan Levy's kind of apart from this because, I mean, we knew he was what level he was at. But you got guys like Scott Penny's playing really, really well. Josh Murphy's playing well. Reece Ruddock has been an absolute monster for us. Baird came in again and was exceptional again. Even young guys like Milne stepped up a bit again when he came on. It's a tough situation for Cullen to be in. You've got hooker roulette now. Tracy, Kelleher, and Sheehan. And Sheehan's actually in a trickier position than people think he is. I always think that the worst position to be in professional rugby anywhere is behind your country's third choice in a skilled position. Because your national coach is going to have numbers 1 and 2 away with him, and he's going to want number 3 to play. So the games when the younger guys would normally get a run, they don't get a run because the national coach wants his number 3 to be staying sharp. It's a really tricky position, but Sheehan has managed it really, really well. He's taken his opportunities when he's got them, even if they're 20 minutes. He got his starts and he did well, and he's doing well in his cameos, as it were.
Well, let's not forget he's only got 3 or 4 caps. Like, he was only capped.
Oh yeah, he's only a kid, like a big kid.
Absolutely.
Yep. I mean, it was just another exceptional performance. All right. We just have a quick look at some of the other results. Munster beat the Ospreys 38-22. Another hat trick scored there by their number 8.
Gavin Coombs. Another fine. He's a cracking looking player, and they've a few coming through now. If they can turn the taps on in their academy like we have, or even approaching what we have, and they look to be doing so. Like, that guy's a beast. I'm very impressed with him.
They're producing quite a few good forwards. There's him and the two brothers,
Thomas Ahern.
Wycherley brothers.
Wycherley's and
Thomas Ahern.
Hodnett.
Thomas Ahern.
Thomas Ahern. We've got 3 of them.
Roman Salanoa.
Yeah. we could name check him. There's a good bit of stuff coming out of their academy, not just our academy drifting down to them. So that's great. That's great for Ireland. Obviously, it's great for Munster, but it takes the pressure off us a bit as well. We can send all ours to Connacht now. It'd be grand.
Yeah. Well, they were beaten by the Scarlets.
Yeah. That was a bit of a competition between shit and shite, I think.
Yeah.
See who can lose that one.
I think Connacht had the extra. Were just that little bit poorer than Scarlets were, which isn't saying a whole lot. Connacht have really blown hot and cold this year. Sometimes they've looked absolutely brilliant, and sometimes they've just looked. I think that they suffer from international call-ups worse than probably anyone else in Ireland, and they find it hard to readjust their game without the without Bundyaki, without Jason's favourite player, without I've forgotten his name, the lad from Tralee in the second row.
Quinn Rue,
the other second row.
Delan.
Yeah, they find it hard to adjust to their absence. They just
they wouldn't be in a too dissimilar situation to Edinburgh, that just don't have the budgets to have, ex-Irish international, or if you take Luke McGrath, I wouldn't call him an ex-international just yet, or Dan Levy, in your team, or even Dave Carney. They don't have that depth of quality.
Yeah.
They've got fellas that they've picked up for a song from, that are very good AIL players playing for Lansdowne or Galwegians.
Yeah, they find it very, very hard to backfill once the big guys. Although, funny enough, their best player is the one they find easiest to replace, or did this weekend anyway, because Tom Farrell was back. Like I say, the second rows, Beelum, those are big losses for them.
Yeah, they used to make hay in the international windows because they lost nobody. It's changed. Things have changed. They lose more players than Ulster now, quite often.
I think at one point Connacht had 7 second rows unavailable to them.
That's a hell of a. That's a hell of a.
That's a big hole to fill. Like, we might struggle at centre because of between injuries and national call-ups, and we've still got a lot of kids coming through. A magnificent production line. Connacht don't have the same.
No, and losing that many locks is trickier than losing centres. I mean, lock is a more key position. So
Ulster put the boot into Zebre. I think they beat them 57-14. That I didn't actually get to see this game, but certainly that's some thrashing.
Yeah, I mean, Ulster's production line. I mean, they have a new young fella on the wing called McElroy. Question is, he's still very young and he's still quite willowy. You need to put on a
tasty but small.
Huh?
He's tasty but small, like so many of their young players.
Yeah, he could do with it, putting on a few pounds, but he looks like he has the hands and the feet. And of course Stuart Moore as well. So I mean, you'd expect that Ulster team, because they're not so apart from Henderson, they don't really lose a lot of forwards. So they were able to, and then they actually have loads of backs. Ulster have loads of backs. Even with all the guys away at international duty, all the guys who are injured, they still have loads. So they were handy enough. And Zebre were very poor, dirt poor. They were dreadful.
Mick Bradley, not long for this job, you reckon?
I don't know. He keeps if he keeps winning 1 in every 4 or 5, I think he might keep his job. But I mean, the expectations of Zebre are very low, even in Italy. I mean, it's kind of, to a certain extent, it's kind of a work placement scheme for some of their internationals.
But they should have won a couple of weeks ago. I think
Against Scarlets.
Scarlets, yeah. They don't have. When Leinster are up against it, and generally they manage to dig deep somewhere and they can pull out a result, and you wonder how did they get that? Zebre don't have that, depth to go to. They just don't have.
They can't go to the well, Jason. They can't go to the well.
What it was, yeah. They
don't have the experience of the net.
Game.
Yeah.
And like it was like the match against Scotland in the I don't know what it's called, the Autumn Internationals.
Autumn Series.
They should have won that game as well.
Autumn Nations Cup, I think it's actually official name, isn't it?
Yes, I think you're right. Which the Guinness Series is part of.
Yes, the Guinness Series is part of the Autumn Nations Cup.
Yeah.
Whatever.
And the Quilter Series is part of, and everything
That's right,
seems to sponsorship except the competition.
I saw the England team. I saw the England team being announced today, and like I'd never seen it written down. I had always heard of it, but he actually calls his replacement finishers.
Oh, they've been doing that now for about 18 months. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I heard him referring to it, but I never actually realised that that's what they call the subs, written down.
Big time, yeah. Quilter Internationals, it sounds like it's something in a knitting competition.
It does, doesn't it?
What are you doing this week? Well, we're having the international quilters over, be grand.
Organised by the local branch of the Women's Institute.
They're going to knit a few Aran jumpers. Be lovely. Wait to see. But anyway, yeah, it doesn't sound very inspiring to me anyway. But hey, what do I know? They'll still beat the shit out of us probably.
Oh yeah.
Well, they picked a very, very strong very, very strong side. Massive forwards, massive backs. Like they definitely aren't rotating their team. Like that's pretty much
There's a few chinks in there. Like they don't have.
Please point them out, John.
Well, I don't know. They have a young fella. I know he's very good and he's very big, but they have a young fella on the bench in the second row. They have a little bit experimentally in the backs. Like Jonathan Joseph hasn't been getting his game in the last few years. I know he has recently, but there's the odd chink. But yeah, that's all it is. Really, is a chink. You expect like England in the World Cup, they had a bench from hell as well as a starting team from like there wasn't a chink really so much. Now there's I'm not so convinced about fellas like Alice Genge. There's a couple of names actually I'm not, because I don't watch the Premiership since it went off wherever the hell it was, Sky. So there's a couple of young lads now that I wouldn't know. That second row guy who I've seen in international, I wouldn't have known him before that. And there's a guy who's
Stuart.
Hill
is on the bench as well, yeah.
But isn't there a back row guy on the bench who I didn't really recognise his name? I think he might be Exeter, is he? I'm not sure. Anyway, I'm not an expert on England's depth anymore in the way I might have been back in the Sky days when I might be watching a match in the Premiership at least every weekend. But yeah, they're big bastards. But unfortunately for them, so are we. We've picked. It might not be a team. I think you said it, Dave, the other day. It's a team that's built to lose, but not by much. Like we've got some big backs. We've got the two centres are huge. We've got a pretty big pack as well. So we're obviously going after them. We're going to hammer the hammer.
Well, I don't know. Are we going after them? Or are we trying to absorb them, John? That's the question. Have we picked a team to absorb what they throw at us, or have we picked a team to go at them? Because I don't think you go at England by I don't think you hammer the hammer against England. Well, per se, I think the way
Unless you're South Africa.
Huh?
Unless you're South Africa.
Unless you're South Africa, where they're the big boys. But what you do with England is you don't go at them with a sledgehammer. You go at them with a stiletto. And I'm not sure.
I agree with you, but I'm just saying that we have picked a very, very, very big team by our standards to play them. Like I think I said to you earlier, it's going to be we're going to be looking for Ross Burns cross kicks because none of the wingers are going to get passes from the centres too often. Might get the odd offload if they're running in the right channel.
Thing now is that the centres or is that the coach? Because I don't think anyone would describe, for example, Connacht under Pat Lam as a botching team, and say Bundyaki was one of the key players in that team. You know, and Robbie Henshaw. So is that the coach or is that the players? I'm kind of inclined to think it's the coach.
Yeah, but my point is that while Chris Farrell has very good hands, Bundyaki has a good offload. Neither of them are renowned for their creating space for other players outside them. You know, they're the kind of players like Ben Teo used to be for Leicester, who, if you follow them round, you get a lovely offload and you might score a try, but you'd have to follow them round. You weren't getting a 30-meter skip pass out from him. You weren't getting. Maybe
we should have picked an open side flanker then.
Yeah, well, we didn't. So
I think they've picked O'Mahony as to have a go at them. Like, he's not really there for much else. Like,
bit of niggle, bit of grunt.
Yeah, and to not take it back, you know, regardless of whether you like him or loathe him, you pretty much know that he's going to be with his angry face on, grabbing someone by a collar.
Yeah,
and I think that's what he's in there for. And if he
I've no doubt that's why he's in there. He's there to try and match England's physicality and aggression. But I don't think that's how you beat England, unless you're South Africa.
Well, I agree with you. I completely agree with you. Like, try and run around them rather than go run through them. Like, we're not. It's not in our genetics. We don't have massive men. Like, you know, Chris Farrell's a massive man, but he's not massive when you put him beside some of their blokes. You know, and like, I think trying to run through them rather than around them is a mistake.
Well, while I agree with both of you on that, that it's not necessarily the way to beat England. However, I think Ireland need a lesson in putting it out there, and you know, because that's what England, like Joe Schmidt teams were very, very kind of fair play, whereas Eddie Jones teams are fucking just kill them. I don't care. Just fucking kill them, and then when they get up, kill them again. But, you know, and we needed maybe to play with that a little bit, because Andy Farrell is much more of he's not necessarily a man for the fair play either. I think he's a bit of a man who's happy to get stuck in, or to, what's the word I'm looking for? Not take a backward step is probably a good description. And you need a bit of that. Okay, you can't win games with it the way you could because everybody's not taking a backward step. But you just got the feeling with Joe Schmidt teams that they were more about the process. They were more about the rugby and the pure, you know, they didn't.
Bit of boot biting bollock. Is that what you're calling for, John?
What? Bit of biting bollock. I am indeed, yeah. I'm not saying that's going to be our game plan going forward. I'm just saying that we need to have a bit of experience of doing that and of scaring the shite out of England, just to put it in their head. Like these guys.
The advantage of it is this is a game that's actually very good in a way, because obviously it's Ireland versus England with everything that brings. But it's also a game that means absolutely nothing. You know,
exactly. So,
I mean, there's nothing at stake in terms of, there's nothing tangible at stake apart from obviously pride and satisfaction and that, but there's nothing tangible at stake, so there's nothing tangible to be lost. So you can actually go all balls out.
But it's also putting it's a double thing. You're putting a little thing in the head of the English players.
Yeah, turning a little screw.
These guys can, if we really piss them off, they can do it. And then you're putting something in the Irish players' head. Hold on, you know, England are great and all that, but we just pushed them that little bit further than they've been pushed by us before, and all of a sudden we got results out of it.
Well, that's one thing. I mean, I don't know if you heard Mike Sherry on Monday or Tuesday. I can't remember what it was. He was talking about how he absolutely fucking hated James Lowe, hated him because he was such a niggly, horrible, annoying fucker to play against. And like he was there, and then all the Munster lads, they really hated James Lowe, and they hadn't come across him because they weren't in camps with him because he wasn't in camps. Now they're in camps. They're saying, "Oh, he's a really good guy," blah blah blah. Because once you get to know a guy, but when you're just playing against him, you fucking hate him. And between him and Peter O'Mahony, there is the ability to get into that England discipline. I mean, they have guys who are hot-headed, who have. I mean, you were talking about Ellis Genge earlier, and you hadn't seen him, John. Maybe you tuned in on one of the many occasions he'd been sin binned.
No, I didn't say I haven't seen Ellen Genge.
No, I'm just making a joke. I'm just saying because he has a poor discipline. Kyle Sinclair has poor discipline. Owen Farrell has very poor disciplinary record. There are ways, that, and you know, the only guy I would say who you can't actually get at is Maro Itoje. The rest of them, you know, they do have questionable mindsets sometimes.
I don't know about Owen Farrell. I think his disciplinary issues are more around not wrapping his arms in tackles and stuff.
He does silly things, John. The red mist comes over Owen Farrell, and he does silly things. The question is, can you get to him? And he's very, very hard to get to, both because A, he is actually brilliant at rugby, and B, the England team kind of protect him.
Well, to take the point of Ellis Genge, like I think he is. Yeah, he's a loose cannon. Of course he is. But he's kind of got a handle on his discipline a little bit. But he's the kind of player that Eddie Jones would love because he's a niggly fuck, you know. And you know, so he'd come on and start a fight, and it's up to you to make him start the wrong fight at the wrong time. And that's how you get the better of him, get him frustrated, you know. But yeah, I think he's a chink that you can work at. And I don't mean that in a racist way. I mean that in a gap in a piece of metal.
There are gaps in the plate armor.
Yeah. So you know, on one hand, if we lose it, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah, and that's the thing because there is both so much and so little riding on this game simultaneously. The Irish players can use this game to kind of experiment on doing a bit of a psychological experiment on the mentality of the England team, which is generally pretty good now. Generally, England teams, but they can lose their discipline. They can lose their heads. And Eddie Jones is not one for calming them down.
That's true. Well, people also forget that Andy Farrell is only, whatever he is, 6 or 7 games. I know he's been around the place for a long time, for 4 years or whatever, but he's only been head coach for not that long. He hasn't had a lot of time. He was straight into a Six Nations, and there was no summer series, so this is it for his 6th, 7th game.
I wouldn't be calling for his head until at least Tuesday.
No, I'm not talking about in terms of calling for his head. I'm talking in terms of him building something.
Oh yeah.
We're very early on in that cycle, and whatever he learns from these games could be invaluable. From both about his players and about other people's players, you know. So,
how many of the Irish pack will get in the England pack?
I'd have Cian Healy unquestionably. I'd probably have Porter. I know I've got green tinted glasses.
Yeah.
Healy for a long ride.
Porter over Vunipola.
Sorry, it'll be Cian Healy over Vunipola, and I'd take Thingamy over Sinclair. Yeah.
Porter I think both over Sinclair. Porter and Furlong over Sinclair.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. When you compare Cian Healy to Vunipola, you know it's not like it's one has got it in one direction and the other's got it. It's not like I'm sure 99% of English fans would take Vunipola every day and twice on Sundays. And he's a lot younger.
With those two, you could pick either, make an argument for either, and you'd be right, no matter which side you're coming down on, because they're the two best tight head or loose head props, I think, in Europe, possibly the world.
Well, I don't know if they can both live up to that, but they're they're bloody good. I'd say that guy is an annoying bastard at hooker. Saracen's hooker, what's his name?
George.
George, yeah.
Jamie George. He's an annoying bastard, but you know that's what you want. And
he's better than anything we have at the moment, anyway. I mean,
that's my point.
Yeah.
I'd have him every time.
You'd have Ryan and Itoje. Second row.
Yeah.
For me, lads, the only Ireland player in the pack would be Ryan that would get in their team.
No, you'd have to have the tight head props ahead of Sinclair, Jay.
Okay. Well, not Porter. I don't think I'd have Porter there.
No?
If Tadhg Furlong was fit, I'd say yes, but he isn't. I'm not sure whether Porter will be in there for me. If you think back, a lot of our problems stemmed about our scrum being decimated, and it was that front row. Was the front row that played against Saracens, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Pummeled.
I think the problem there was a system one rather than individual players, because our back row we spent half the time meerkatting. So
yeah, there's been a lot talked about that scrum performance, and even our Leinster scrum coach came out about it there recently, and said that they were trying all kinds of new techniques and starting on their knees and doing this, that, and the other, and that they learned a lot from it, which I've no doubt they did. And it's, as Dave said, it's a constant kind of choice between an 8-man push and what's Vunipola or whoever we're going to do off the back of this next scrum. So there's
the fact remains, lads. Regardless, every other team has those options to do that when they play, and Saracens were the only team that have done it to Leinster over for a long time. Regardless of the result, they decimate, and they won the game based on killing our scrum. They certainly did. They
certainly did. But I as I say, I think it was a system rather than individual.
The couple of the previous 2 weeks, right? That was our 5th match after we came back from lockdown. We had played, so there was a lot of arguments about the league is not fit for standard because it's so many facile wins. There was 8 months or 6 months off between the last match and the first one back. We played 4 matches. 2 against 2 different provinces, Ulster twice, Munster twice, and then we played Saracens. So, before those brickbats thrown, they should have actually looked at who were Leinster playing, rather than, castigating the whole league. But apart from that, the Leinster scrum, I can't reiterate it enough. That was regardless of what tactics Saracens employed. I've no doubt that Munster employed them. That fucking every other team they come up against, to a lesser or greater extent, employ underhanded, cheating tactics, and no doubt Leinster do as well. It's how you handle it. They couldn't handle it, and it was that front row. And I would just be concerned. So there's absolutely no way we'd have Andy Porter.
I don't think the problem is
making it in the team.
I don't think the problem was a tactical thing for Saracens. I think the problem was that it was 5 against 8 because we were shitting ourselves about Vunipola coming off the back of a scrum, and we'd spoken about it for weeks in advance. What are we going to do about Vunipola back off scrum? What are we going to do about Vunipola coming back off scrum? And our back row was coming off the moment the ball was fed almost. And I think that was a problem. It wasn't a problem in every case, certainly not. I mean, Saracens do have a brilliant scrum. A lot of their game is built on it. But I still don't think it was a matter of individual errors per se. I think it was a systems error. But it's a different system that Ireland play anyway, and there's different individuals there. So you've got guys who I would hope
really only count the front 5 that really contribute to the scrum.
No,
4 of those front 5.
I think we all know an 8-man shove is always going to beat a 5-man shove, Jay.
An 8-man shove, the flankers contribute very little to it. They're pushing on one shoulder, and they're not supposed to be pushing straight. They're supposed to be keeping the props in.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, they steer.
They're not
anyway.
It's the front 5 contribute 85% of the grunt to the scrum, and 4 of those 5 were in the Leinster pack against Saracens. I just don't think that we have that base in our pack. And then if I look at the other, you mentioned, we've got these big monsters in midfield, and we've got James Lowe on the wing, we've quite a slight guy, Hugo Keenan, and another slight guy, Keith Earls, in two of our back three. Like, you know, I don't get the whole. I don't get where
You don't see the concept.
it's just a mishmash of a selection. It's just there's no structure to it. It's just like.
Well, that's my question. Is it are we going to go around that? Are we going to try and go through them? Because you look at some of the names that are picked or what's expected of those guys. It's a team that's supposed to, go through them. But I'm not entirely sure Farrell is that stupid. There's no way he could be that stupid. I mean, I watched the guy play rugby league. I watched the guy play what little rugby union he did play, and he's not stupid. He was a brilliant tactician as a rugby league player, a brilliant tactician on the pitch. He knows there's no way that they're going to beat England in an arm wrestle. He must know that. So I assume he has something else in mind.
Well, we'll find out soon enough.
Actually, did anyone see State of Origin?
No,
it was great.
Dude, just going back to the Ireland-Wales game, like when we were watching the Ireland-Wales game, like I was just disappointed with how little creativity we showed in the game. Like Wales were awful, so they, I didn't think they contributed much, but we just didn't seem to want to attack. Like there was just. I was just
very
so
limited rugby. Yeah, we did. I thought that was a disappointing performance. I mean, I will give the caveat that we did go through 2.5 out halves at the time in the course of the match, which kind of ruins continuity. Yeah. But I still think that we should have done a lot better against that Welsh team, especially a Welsh team that had just sacked its defensive coach. And we're looking a bit shonky, as I sometimes say. And we didn't do much against them. That worried me. I have to admit, that did worry me that we were quite passive. Admittedly, without ever been in any danger of losing the match, but we were quite passive, and we didn't put them away the way in England would or New Zealand would. We didn't do that.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. But they are also in chaos. Like they've got a Gatland hangover that you wouldn't believe. The same amount of games pretty much for both Farrell and your man is going to be fired soon. So Wales are not used to it. Like the 12, 13 years at Gatland, they're not used to
change
this kind of a run. And Gatland wouldn't have sat still for it,
Is there an element where Pivac is just going to have to go and clean house and get rid of all the old, and I don't know if there's anything to do with this, so I'm just saying, to get rid of all the old Gatlandistas from the squad?
I think the house is going to clean Pivac, unfortunately, rather than him cleaning the house.
Yeah.
I think that's the way it's going to go from the rumours, but you never know. You could certainly do with cleaning house, but it's a bit like Brian O'Driscoll. Who's going to tell Alan Wynne-Jones he can't play till the end of the season?
Yeah. I suppose, yeah. And in fairness, I mean, there's no danger of Alan Wynne-Jones ever giving less than 100%.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, player power seems to be a very big thing in Wales. Do you remember, like they got Ruddock sacked. The players got Ruddock sacked
after winning the Grand Slam.
Yeah. So it's not unknown that they'll kind of flex their muscles.
Welsh rugby politics looks at the current Trump situation and goes, amateurs.
There's quite an interesting podcast. I don't know whether you've listened to it. It's called Under the Sticks. It's kind of I'm not sure. I think it's an official Guinness Pro 14 or Pro 12 podcast, but Sean Holly's on it. And a couple of weeks ago, he was talking. One journalist was basically saying, "Oh, look, might be time that Cardiff got over themselves, got rid of the Blues, and just called themselves Cardiff." And Sean Holly, who had been former coach of the Ospreys, and he was talking about, how Neath and Swansea kind of had both sets of supporters hated each other, and they kind of got rid of the Neath Swansea's Ospreys, just call it the Ospreys. and they kind of got a bit more buy-in. But like, because Cardiff is in the name Cardiff Blues, he was going, well, like people from the valleys just will not go and be interested in it. And like they don't have the money to have a fifth, like to have a separate identity Cardiff team.
And to play in the Arms Park, they have to be called Cardiff.
Yeah.
It's in the trust.
They don't have
in the covenant. They have no choice in the matter.
They don't have the money to have 4 bloody regions. Never mind.
No, maybe not.
And 5 lasted a whole season, and the Celtic Warriors fell apart. Bridgend was assimilated into the Ospreys as well.
If the move to Cardiff City Stadium had worked out, then you might have seen the Cardiff brand been slowly retired. But it didn't. So they had to come back to the Arms Park, and they've no choice in the matter now.
Yeah, it's a shit situation they're in, to be fair. Like they can't.
While they could be lost in, but they could move into the Millennium or the Principality Stadium, and play in an empty stadium. Fair enough, but to avoid.
It's the only other way, I guess. I don't think there's another stadium in the Cardiff City area unless they try and move back to the CCS, and I don't think that would be a realistic option.
Yeah, no, that's not looking good. But the money's in Cardiff as well. Don't forget, there's bugger all money in the valleys. There's bugger all money in Pontypridd, which is the kind of home of Valleys rugby. So nothing's going to happen there. And there's bugger all money in Welsh rugby generally, even before pandemics or anything like that happened. But anyway,
I got a text today saying that money that they were supposed to be receiving was 30 million. The 4 regions were supposed to be receiving 30 million from the WRU. That money actually looks like it's only going to be 3 million now. And the talk of mergers is back on the cards. That was just a text that I got today. So I don't know whether
that's not surprising, because UK Gov announced its COVID support for sports, but none of it is going to the devolved regions. So none of it's going to Wales, Scotland, or Northern Ireland, because sports is a devolved competency. But the WRU actually was, and I presume other sporting bodies as well. It's not that they were been stupid or anything. I think it's just that they had understood that the money was actually going to be coming into Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland as well, and now it's not. And I'd say that might have been a bit of a blow and might have put a halt to their gallop in terms of, because they did take out that, what was the 20 million loan?
30
million. They did take out that loan, and I think it might change how they disseminate those funds, seeing as there isn't going to be money coming from HMG.
Well, God bless CVC. They just signed up before the pandemic, didn't they?
Yeah, but that money's burned through now. That's gone. I
know, but it has at least kept them alive. I know they had to burn.
It kept them afloat, all right. Yeah.
It's like burning the furniture for firewood. But at least you didn't die of cold,
Yeah. And to think, my big worry about that money was that the Welsh regions would use it to pay off owners.
Well, that would have been a bigger waste of money, in fairness.
I know, yeah, but in terms of, that was my worry, how naive we were back in December and January.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, just looking at some of the other fixtures, obviously, the Italy-Fiji game has been postponed because of COVID, and Fiji were to play France last weekend. France were awarded a 28-0 bonus point victory.
Which is a bit odd, really. Isn't it in a competition? Normally it's a draw, or it's whatever about a win.
Different competitions.
Like a walkover, I presume.
Yeah.
I understand, but why get the extra point is my point. Anyway, carry on.
I don't know. Actually, to be fair, I don't understand why myself, but sure, that's the way it is.
Yeah. So obviously, you mentioned earlier, there's lots of COVID knocking around. Those certainly in the Fiji camp.
God, they got more COVID than the Irish soccer team.
Well, Wales, Georgia doesn't really get the juice flowing.
Well, there's an interesting subplot to it. This is a game that Georgia might consider winnable. And
Surely not, Dave. Surely not.
if you're looking at the teams in your group and you're thinking who you might beat, you know, the way Wales are at the moment, they might think that this is a game that they could target. And it would, what you were saying earlier about Pivac, you know, might be shown the door early. This would be a nail in that coffin if he were to lose this game.
Oh, he's gone if he's losing this one.
Yeah.
Jesus.
I suppose it'll be an eye opener to see. You know, there's a lot of kind of chit chat about whether or not Georgia should replace Italy in the Six Nations, and you know, I suppose we can kind of gauge how good, bad, or indifferent they are in the match against Wales or against us. I suppose, like, you know, England are a bit of a juggernaut, so like I watched some of that match last weekend. You know, just looked like England just kind of didn't get out of third gear, just went through the motions.
Like watching Leicester.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I think that the result against Scotland as well, I think Scotland found them a lot easier to deal with than they did Italy.
Look, even if they were considerably better than Italy, which they're not, there's 4 million people and bugger all money, as opposed to, I know it's never really been tapped into, but there's 60 million people in Italy and a substantial amount of money in the areas where rugby is popular. So, you know, it's not going to happen no matter how good Georgia get, within reason. Obviously, if Georgia turn into the All Blacks overnight, which again is not going to happen. So I don't see any changes. The only change I can see to the Six Nations is it becomes 7 with South Africa, and then it might be a case of dropping bloody Italy into the competition below. Who knows what way that'll go if indeed South Africa do join in.
Well, just before we go, we'll just quickly have a look at, we're playing obviously Cardiff next weekend. You know, it's hard to know what sort of team Cardiff are going to put out, but certainly there's plenty of strength and depth from a Leinster point of view. I think there's 9 starters in the Ireland team, and throw in maybe 3 or 4 more on the bench. So, you know, we know we've got massive strength that we can play kind of a semi-international pack.
We should have comfortably too much for Cardiff, but who knows? Miracles happen. Hopefully they don't happen this week. But yeah, we've got. Somebody said during the week we were missing 25 players between injury and we have a bit of an injury crisis. Injury and Ireland call-ups. So out of a squad of 40, whatever. Now, there are guys coming through from the academy, so it's not really a squad of 45. It's more like a squad of 60 at least. But it's still, you know, you're down to your bare bones. It's just that our bare bones are substantial bones. They're the bones of a world heavyweight champion boxer, not of a 6-year-old child.
Big boners.
Big bones. We've got heavy bones. That's our problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, I'd say whatever selection would be kind of a bit of a juggling of what we've had so far in terms of, you know, you might see Jimmy O'Brien at centre, you might see Frawley at fullback or at out half, you might see Hawkshaw come in. You know, they'll move. I don't want to say deck chairs on the Titanic because that's the wrong analogy, but they'll move the chairs around the table, as it were. You might see Ryan Baird come in at 6 and give Fardy a break, or Toner a break. You never know, or in the second row, Maloney could come in. There's things they can do to freshen up the team without weakening it.
Yeah, it was funny that when we had all those guys, I think we were saying last week about having either 6 blindsides or 6 second rows in the or was it 5 in the match day 23. The only second rows that hadn't played 6 were the tallest one, Devin Toner, and the shortest one, Ross Maloney. And on that note.
Well, just to quickly, some of the other fixtures. Connacht can get their winning streak back on track. They go over to Zebre. Ulster host the Scarlets. and Munster travel over to Glasgow. Yeah, so they're the matches for next weekend. So another feast of rugby between those Pro 14 matches and the remaining autumn internationals.
Yep.
Yeah, but Ulster can soften the Scarlets up for us maybe, because we have them the following week.
Hopefully. Well, my boys, as ever, thanks very much for joining us. Thanks very much for watching. If you are following us on Facebook or Twitter, please give us a subscription and a like. Thanks a million. Cheers.